Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. We have a super special guest that I've been following his trajectory for a while, and I'm really passionate about what he does. So when he accepted to be a guest in this podcast, I was very, very happy. His name is Dr. Hugo De La Peña. He's a cancer consultant for the NHS, Cancer UK Ambassador, and Maggie's clinical lead. His mission is to eliminate cancer once and for all. So that's a very big mission, but I'm going to let Hugo introduce himself and tell us a little bit about this very important global mission that he's on. Hugo, thank you for being here.
No, thank you, Monica. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, well, I am an NHS cancer consultant. I don't have private practice. Everything I do is within the NHS, and I'm a cancer consultant. I'm a Cancer Research UK ambassador, and what that means is that we try to put pressure in governments and individuals to pass legislations, and we can talk about that in a bit. But I have to say, a lot of the things that I'm going to say today, they're my personal views. So today, even though I work with Cancer Research UK, and even though I love with Maggie's, and there's two charities that I have fallen in love from the very beginning, what I'm going to say today, they're my views. They're not. I'm not representing Cancer Research UK. I'm not representing Maggie's. I'm not going to say. I'm not planning to say anything controversial, really. But just a disclaimer. And yeah, so for me, everything is about treating cancer. And I started very, very early on. I think it's funny how sometimes how life just dictates in a way what happens to us. Because I was always very interested in nature and natural sciences and how the body works and how to fix and how to manipulate things to fix the body and make things better. But when I was 13 years old, I had these tumors everywhere. I had like golf ball size lumps in my neck and armpits and groins and everywhere. It was quite dramatic, and they took one of the lymph nodes from my neck, and I was given the diagnosis of lymphoma. And yeah, at the time, I was never, I had never really understood what cancer was. I wasn't afraid of the word, and I never really felt unwell. But what I did see is how everyone around me changed, and how the behavior of everyone, and my parents and uncles and all my family, how suddenly it was, oh, Hugo, what do you need? And Hugo here and Hugo there. And it was that struck me, how this word cancer marks and the whole family, how everything, all the behavior and everything, the atmosphere just changed. And it took, all of this happening over 6 months. And they did it's a study called lymphogram that they do. They opened up your feet and they put a blue dye, so they paint you all blue to paint all your lymphatic system. And we don't do those studies anymore, because with modern technology and modern scanners, those lymphograms, we don't do them anymore. But the other time, because I had to open up my feet, I couldn't walk for a bit, so I was in a wheelchair. And then because of these lumps were very impressive, they wanted to start treatment right away. And they wanted to take my spleen out, and then they wanted to start chemotherapy ASAP. At the time, all this happened in Mexico. So the chemotherapy that we needed, we didn't have it in Mexico. So we had to drive to the States. We had to drive to the MD. So we had to drive to the States, to the MD Anderson, to get the chemotherapy. We got the chemotherapy, drove back with the chemotherapy in the car. And I couldn't really walk because I was in a wheelchair. And I remember conversations saying, oh, well, you're gonna lose your hair, so how about these caps and this and that. And I thought, well, clearly this is very serious. This cancer diagnosis, clearly this is something very serious. And I also remember overhearing conversations, how people used to tell my dad, don't panic, don't start selling things, don't just keep calm. And so eventually, so we had the chemo, we're ready to take my spleen out, we're ready to start the chemotherapy. By then, this lymph node had gone to many, many cities in Mexico. They sent it to Mexico City. And I remember very clearly, just before Christmas, we had a phone call, and my dad answered, and it was one of the histopathologists from Mexico City. And they said, have you started Hugo on chemotherapy? And my dad said, well, we haven't started, but we have it now, and we start next week. And the histopathologist said, don't give it. Do not give it. He doesn't have lymphoma. This is something else, and it's called Cushing syndrome. And even now we don't really know what that is. We think it's driven by a virus, and all your lymph nodes and everything. So your immune system goes into overdrive, and you get this dramatic reaction that it mimics lymphoma. It looks exactly like lymphoma, apart from the fact that it's not cancer. And so eventually, all these lumps they disappeared. But for 6 months, I did see how this word cancer made everyone panic, and it's almost like it was the worst diagnosis that anyone could get. And I mean, that is true. Cancer is a brutal disease. It's cruel, it's unfair, and it doesn't discriminate. But very early on, then I thought, well, either, I can bury my head in the sand and hope that this is never going to happen to me again, or any of my relatives, or I prepare and I study this disease so that I can tackle it. So then after that, my mission was almost, well, okay, I need to be a cancer doctor. And to be a cancer doctor, I needed to study medicine. So the pathway for me to become a cancer consultant was to do medicine. So I did medicine in Mexico, and I did very well in medicine. And I finished medical school as the first place of my class in the generation. And because of that, as a prize, if you like, the Mexican government gave me a scholarship to do a PhD anywhere. And so I could have gone to the States, but the States was never really attractive to me. So I came to the UK. So I came to London. I went to UCL, to the Royal Free Hospital, to do my PhD in cancer research. And so I did my PhD for 5 years, just studying how to kill cancer using the immune system. And I remember when I got to London, I was given a lot of PhD potential projects, and I didn't like any of them. And I said, I don't want to do this. And so I remember I had a mini fight with one of my supervisors, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to create vaccines against cancer that we can put into humans to kill cancer. And he said, well, okay, off you go. So he kind of gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. In a PhD, you have to discover something. You have to do something new. And so I started creating vaccines against cancer. And eventually that gave me the Young Scientist Award in the UK. And in the final of that award, that competition, there were people from Cambridge, from Oxford, from Imperial, and me. And I won that. And that was a psychological switch that changed my life. Because it was at that point, one thing is to do well in medical school in your own country. But then suddenly I was competing with Cambridge and Oxford in the UK. And that was a massive psychological switch for me. Then I never looked back after that. Because then my research career started to go very well. So after that, then I was invited to go to Cambridge to do a postdoc. So I stayed 2 years in Cambridge in Downing College with Professor Cook. And again, just using the immune system, how to isolate, how to manipulate the immune system. So my research career was going really well. And we started publishing then, in Science, and we started publishing in JCI. So very, very good journals. I did another postdoc. And then my research career was going really, really well. But then at that time, I met my wife, Alison, in London. And by then, then I thought, okay, we're going to stay in the UK. Because, if I want to do something meaningful against cancer, I need to prepare in the best universities. So it was very clear to me that I couldn't really go back and that I needed to stay. But what I really wanted to do was to develop drugs to put in clinical trials to then put them into patients, to then change clinical practice, because that's the only way that you can really cure more people, keep people living for longer. So I remember saying to Alison, look, we're going to stay in the UK. I want to put medicines into humans. And to do that, I need to go back to medicine. So even though my research career was going really well, I said, I have to go back to medicine. I can't give it up. And it's not that I didn't want to give it up, but I said, if I want to put drugs into clinical trials to change people's lives, I need to go back to medicine. So I had to go back to medicine. And then I went to Oxford. And then in Oxford, I finished my cancer training. And then by then, I had been to UCL in London, to Cambridge, and to Oxford. And I don't say that because I want to show off, because I don't. But I am very proud of that. I am very proud.
Of course, you should be proud. You've achieved a lot.
Yeah, and when I graduated from Oxford, having my parents here, my brothers, that was a massive, massive moment of pride for everyone. But unfortunately, I did have to leave research slightly, like pure research, because even though now we still do research, but it's a different type. It's a different type of research, and that's how I came from Mexico to the UK to then become a cancer consultant. But it's almost funny how sometimes things happen very early on in your life that just dictate in some ways what you're going to do.
So I wonder, Hugo, you're so driven, and I was just going to say this must be connected to your early experience, because how do you achieve so much and stay driven and motivated? You've been in the best places in the world for research, and at the same time, you seem to be very passionate about. You're passionate about research, but I think your thing is actually treating patients and with the patients more than research. So I want to know, how many years did you spend doing research, and when did you realize, well, actually, I prefer to be with my patients rather than be in the lab?
Yeah, and I did pure research. I did pure research for 12 years.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
So not a long time. And I do miss it. But when you design or participate in clinical trials, I'm not going to bore you with the details of a clinical trial, but in a clinical trial, so the patients will receive either the best treatment we currently have, or the best treatment we currently have plus what we think is a wonder drug. And it is that wonder drug that makes you cure more people, and that allows you to keep that. If you have to accept that a cancer cannot be cured, then that cancer has to become a chronic disease. And it's only with these wonder drugs that you can achieve that. Or if your cure rates are already very good, then you need to make the treatments less toxic. Mm-hmm. But the reason that cancer has been my thing, if you like, is because cancer is a brutal disease, and it's cruel and it's unfair. And the problem is that it's very common. 1 in 2 of us. 1 in 2 of us. And that is very shocking. It's actually quite scary. And you think, well, it's going to happen to me again. It's going to happen. Yeah. And if it's not me, it'll be my dad or it'll be my wife. And so, once I became a doctor, a cancer consultant, then my dad had bowel cancer. Yeah. And I didn't operate on him, but I was part of the team that helped my dad get cured from bowel cancer. And that was, for me, is a massive, massive accomplishment. If I die tomorrow, I'm happy because at least I helped my dad get cured from cancer. But again, it's so common that not because my dad had it, not because I was misdiagnosed when I was a teenager. And I did have a skin cancer 2 years ago. And not because of that, I think, oh, well, that's me done. It's not going to happen again. And when you see royalty with cancer, you see very famous people with cancer, the richest people on earth with cancer. Yeah. There is no special club.
No.
It doesn't matter how pretty you are, how cool you are, how much money you are, how famous you are, color of the skin is irrelevant. There is no special club. And we're truly, truly in it together. One of the scary things for me is that before 2015, the chances of getting cancer was 1 in 4. But after 2015 is 1 in 2.
So what changed? What changed?
Yeah, something's happening. Yeah. We don't exactly know what it is. We have some sort of idea. Mm-hmm. Clearly, it had, and the richest countries is where we see that trend even more. So
Oh,
clearly, it's something to do with way of life, with chronic stress, with what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, what we smoke. Yeah, sun exposure, chronic stress is a massive issue, and clearly, way of life has something to do with it. And yeah, you could argue that there's always been a lot of cancer, but that now we're better at diagnosing cancer. The technology is better. We have a lot of screening. People are more aware. So you could argue that it's not necessarily that there is more cancer, it's just that we're better at diagnosing. But actually, cancer is on the rise. It is. So
yeah, my mom had cancer, Hugo, a few years ago, like 5 years ago, and it was a shock because she seems to conduct a very healthy lifestyle. She's a stay-at-home mom, and I'm like, what stress can you have? That's what, right? But
yeah,
you don't know, and
yeah.
obviously,
Absolutely. What we should not think, we know that 40% of cancers are preventable. We know that.
yeah.
But what we should never think is that when someone has cancer, that is their fault, because it isn't.
No, that's the worst. Yeah.
Most cancers, this is not gonna make anyone feel any better. But most cancers are bad luck.
We can control it.
Exactly.
No?
Most of the women that I see, I treat breast cancer. Most
cancer.
of the women that I see don't smoke, don't drink, have a healthy lifestyle.
That's my mom.
They're not overweight, and it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cruelty of it. That's the unfairness of it, which just doesn't sit with me. And when you think about breast cancer, for example, there's 200 types of cancer. But if you just take breast cancer, for example, commonest cancer in women, actually commonest cancer in the UK, full stop. 1 in 7 women will have breast cancer. And again, they're young. The average of breast cancer, is from 55 to 65. But we're getting younger and younger women with cancer, breast cancer, and it destroys families, young families, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And that's why you can't just relax and let go. It's something that is so personal, and it could be my wife, could be my mom. Who is next? So when it happens, then we need to have the best treatments possible to cure as much people as we can.
So you said it's purely bad luck, but you also, so this event is called the 5 things that you can do from today to prevent it, because I guess prevention is very, very important in the fight towards cancer.
Absolutely.
So what are those five things?
I've said this many times before. I love curing cancer. I love killing cancer. Love it. But a cancer prevented will always be better than a cancer cure. Always. Mm-hmm. And there are things, we know that 40% of cancer are preventable. How? One of the main things is don't smoke. Don't smoke. And we're not talking about cutting down in smoking. It's don't smoke. Okay? Because smoking, clearly it causes lung cancer. We know that. But smoking also causes some types of breast cancer, triple negative breast cancer. And it causes 30% of cancers in general. So smoking is not just lung. It causes 30% of cancers, smoking. So the first one is don't smoke.
Okay, cigarettes. Does that include vaping?
Well,
because some people believe that, no, it's not that bad. But
so
what is your view?
The only justifiable scenario where vaping is acceptable is if you are a heavy chronic smoker and you want to quit. Vaping is the way. Okay, because with vapes you have the nicotine, and which is what is make you addicted, and is not as harmful as cigarettes. Now we don't know if vaping causes cancer. We don't know that yet. Okay, what we do know is that vaping causes. We've seen a lot of exacerbations of asthma. It can definitely cause injury to the lungs. There's no question about that. And if you believe that chronic inflammation is the seed of cancer, then it's quite likely that vaping will cause cancer. It's just that we don't know that yet. So if you're a heavy chronic smoker and you want to quit, and vaping is the way to get you off the cigarettes, fine. That's it. What is completely immoral is that we see vaping marketed to kids and to teenagers with, cherry flavor and bubblegum flavor and that sort of thing. That is immoral. That is immoral. And we have seen in kids a lot of asthma attacks and exacerbations of respiratory diseases because of vaping. So again, we don't know if vaping causes cancer yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I suspect it has
Yeah,
something to do.
we don't know. We don't know. Look,
Yeah.
there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things in cancer that we don't know yet. Okay, and that's fine. We're trying to find them out, and we're trying to invest and research and all that. We're trying to get the answers. But there are a lot of things in cancer that we still don't know, and that's fine. We can live with it. But there are a lot of things that we do know. And there are a lot of things that we do know and that we've known for years. The link between smoking and lung cancer, the first paper was published 70 years ago, 70. So we've known for the last 70 years that smoking causes lung cancer, and yet here we are with no legislation, no protection, and you think, how can that be? And those are the things that we find very frustrating. Yeah. But in terms of cancer prevention, clearly, don't smoke. That's number one.
Yeah, number one. Okay.
Number two is we need to cut down on alcohol intake. I'm not saying don't drink, because I would be a hypocrite, because I do drink, and I'm not going to say you have to stop drinking, because that's never going to happen. But we have to cut down on alcohol consumption. We have to have alcohol-free days, and we have to have more alcohol-free days than the days that we drink. Alcohol is a direct hit to the liver, but all the metabolites from alcohol cause injury, and they cause mutations, and they cause cancer. And alcohol can cause cancer in everything that is involved in the GI tract, so from mouth, esophagus, stomach, pancreas, bowel. So alcohol is a risk factor, no question. So we need to cut down in alcohol consumption. That's number two.
Okay, but I have a question. So what would be the acceptable? I don't drink that much. I don't take alcohol well anyway. But is it 1 glass of wine per week?
There is no safe. No one's gonna like this answer, because there is no safe amount of alcohol. There isn't. Okay, but we have to be realistic. Clearly, if we say people don't drink, clearly no one. That's undoable. You could argue, well, that's very sad. Well, probably it is, but we just need to cut down. There is no safe amount of alcohol. That's the answer.
Hugo, I'm curious, because some cultures, because of religious reasons, they don't drink alcohol, and I wonder if the incidence of cancer is lower.
Well, of some cancers it will be. Okay. Some cancers it will be, but it's not. Yeah, clearly alcohol is a factor, but it's not. And we know, for example, if you drink and you smoke, then that has a synergistic effect. So, for example, if you drink and smoke, the amount of cancer that we see in mouth and esophagus are higher, because you get a double hit. But yeah, there's no safe amount of alcohol that we can recommend, because there isn't.
Okay, thank you. that clarifies. So what is number 3?
So number 3 is to have a healthy weight. And because I do go to primary schools and secondary schools and talk to kids about healthy weight. And in schools, because what you don't want to give the wrong message to say, you say, well, being overweight is a risk factor for cancer, because what you don't want is then for kids to say, okay, I'm not gonna eat, and they're all gonna become anorexic because I said don't be overweight. So in schools, there are BMI charts that, according to height, according to age, that's the weight that someone must or should have. In adults, it's easy, because in adults, you know what should be your healthy weight. With your clothes, you just and you see in the mirror. So healthy weight. The problem with excess fat, there are some cancers, for example, breast cancers. The commonest type of breast cancer is the estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. These are cancers that feed from estrogen. Estrogen is a female hormone. Estrogen doesn't cause cancer. I have to make that very clear. Estrogen does not cause cancer. But the more fat there is, the more estrogen someone makes. And if you have a lot of estrogen, you can potentially feed cancer. But also what we know is, just going to go back a bit, our immune system, our immune system deals with viruses, bacteria, parasites, keeps us clean. But our immune system is also scouting and searching for cancer cells. And we know that our immune system is killing cancer cells all the time. In you and me, your immune system is killing either cells that are cancer or cells that are becoming cancer. When you have a lot of fat, when there's a lot of fat, the blood vessels cannot penetrate very well. And that's where your immune system is going. So if you have a lot of fat and you don't have enough blood vessels, your immune system cannot get there. And if your immune system cannot get there, your immune system cannot search, scout, and kill what it cannot see. And we also know that excess fat causes chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation is a seed for cancer. So being overweight is a risk factor for cancer. So that's why healthy weight is so important.
So I have another question, Hugo. So I guess, is menopause a risk factor? Because as you know, levels of estrogen change and more weight is put around the stomach area. So do you see an increase in breast cancer, for example, when women hit menopause because of estrogen levels?
Cancer is more common. Breast cancer is more common in post-menopausal women.
I see.
But not all breast cancers feed from estrogen. So I wouldn't say that the menopause is a risk factor for cancer. No. But some of the other things that happen is that when you reach 65, so once you get to 65, you do start losing what we call the memory pool of T cells. So some of your immune system, once you reach 65, some of your immune system starts to go down. Your ability to mount immune responses, against anything, cancer, viruses, is intact. Mm-hmm. But your memory pool does go down, and that memory pool will have a lot of T cells against cancer. And as those go down, then cancers go up. Yeah. And it's the same with HRT. Some people say, well, is HRT a risk factor for cancer? Well, not really, because HRT, the problem with HRT is that it's artificial estrogen or artificial progesterone. So you're giving women hormones. Again, those hormones do not cause cancer, but they can potentially feed a cancer. But I wouldn't say either that HRT causes cancer, because it doesn't. And for a lot of women, HRT is magic. Okay. It's just that when someone has had a breast cancer that feeds from estrogen, then that woman can never, ever have HRT.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So what is the next? I think we're on the 4th.
So number 4 is we need to enjoy the sun responsibly.
That's difficult here, though.
Oh, yeah. The benefits, the benefits from sunlight are incredible. Don't get me wrong. And there's nothing more amazing than go for a walk when the sun is beating. Amazing. Just the benefits from mental health are monumental. You need sun to make vitamin D. That's all fine. But the problem is the irresponsible exposure to sun. But it's not always intentional. Sometimes, we go to the beach, and especially kids, they want, or anyone, any age, you want to get a tan. Mm-hmm. and you overdo it, okay? Because a tan is a burn. Tan is effectively is a burn, and so is irresponsible sun exposure. But I'll tell you, the skin cancer that I had in the arm, it wasn't a melanoma. Melanoma are very aggressive cancers that are caused by sun exposure. But the skin cancer that I had, it wasn't a melanoma, but it's caused by sun exposure as well. Mm. And the reason that happened is because I drive. When I'm driving, I drive like this, with facing the sun, and you're not aware of it. You're not aware of that.
No.
So sometimes you are exposed to sun when you don't want to get exposed. You could go to a football game, you could go to a festival, you could go to Glastonbury, you could go to Wimbledon, and you're not meaning to get sun exposure. But once you're there, you can't leave, and then you're exposed. So it's the same when you're driving. I'm not aware that I'm getting the sun, but I am. Yeah. And so that's why how I got it. And so it's not always that you're trying to get a tan, or that you're just being irresponsible.
It just happens.
It just happens. It just happens. But so we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with the sun, because as amazing as it is, it can be very dangerous. And it's almost, there are some skin cancers that really wouldn't exist if it wasn't for sun exposure.
So what would be the optimal, like, daily dose of sunlight? What would be the optimal?
It depends. It depends on the skin color.
This is interesting.
Because again, sometimes there's a misconception to think that people with darker skin, that they cannot get skin cancer. Of course they can. Melanomas can happen in any color. But it is true. And I say cancer doesn't discriminate. But yeah, the whiter someone is, the more at risk they are. And so again, so my safe dose of sun will be different to someone whiter than me and to someone darker than me, because it depends how much your skin can tolerate. But what we do need to do, I mean, ideally, it's a big ask, but you have to have sun cream with you, not on you, but with you, a bottle of sun cream, just in case you are suddenly in a place where you cannot live and you're just exposed to the sun. And we need to avoid, that. Cancer Research UK has a very good graph of how, depending on how you see the shade of your body in the ground, whether you need to avoid the sun or not. But really, I mean, if the middle of the day, we need to try to avoid that. But it's the chronic sun exposure that causes the damage. If you get a tan, a one-off is not a problem, but it's when it's repeated, that's when it becomes a problem.
Okay, so it depends on skin color. And what about the fifth one, Hugo? I think I know, because we talked before, and I find this the most difficult. The fifth thing you can do to prevent cancer. Tell us.
Yeah. Well, I'll just add very quickly a sixth one, which is, now that we have the HPV vaccine, girls and boys, they need to get the HPV vaccine, because that's a cancer you can prevent, and that's a cancer you can eradicate from the face of the enemy. And with a very simple intervention, you can prevent a cancer with a jab. So that's something else. But yeah, the fifth thing or sixth thing is chronic stress. And we have to manage chronic stress, because again, we know that chronic stress will dampen your immune system, and if your immune system goes down, cancers go on. Chronic stress is very difficult to manage, because we are all stressed out, all of us, all the time. We're stressed because of work, because of relationships, because of money, because of friendships, because of the kids. It's unavoidable. It's part of life. But what we do have to do is to have protected time each day, ideally, to release stress. And, we say minimum half an hour a day, every day, dedicated to you, to release stress. And that could be, again, that'll be different for everyone. For some people will be yoga, for others swimming or cycling or football or running, music, whatever it is. But you have to have that time protected. What we should not do, because this is something that I wouldn't say it's a British thing. This happens everywhere. If you have a long day or a hard day, you'll say, oh, well, I'm going to have a glass of wine because I had a hard day.
And a takeaway.
I'm going to have that extra chocolate or that pie because I had a hard day. I deserve it. No. That's wrong. That's wrong. And that is something that I have learned, because I have done that as well. But I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore, because then you start creating these bad habits that won't help you in any way, because it won't make you, if you drink because you had a hard day, that's going to make you more tired. You're probably going to put a bit more, if you do it repetitively, you're going to put on weight, and it just becomes this vicious circle that it doesn't help anyone. And I just remember what I was going to say about sun exposure, that's actually quite, I wouldn't say it's a British thing, but because the weather in the UK is not amazing most of the time, as soon as the sun comes out, boys, shirts off, in the parks, everyone's semi-naked, and they start drinking. That's a recipe for disaster. And it's not that it's wrong. I completely understand. I get it, but it's dangerous. It's a dangerous practice. But coming back to the chronic stress, is very difficult to do, and I can tell you, I haven't managed to do it properly, because especially I have 6 clinics a week, and most days I just can't get the time to say, okay, I'm gonna find this half an hour to relax. I haven't managed to do that most days. So I managed to do it sometimes on Friday, Saturday, Sundays. At the beginning of the week is quite hard. It is quite hard. But what I don't do is that I had a hard day and then I drink. No, I don't do that. I have the extra chocolate or the extra pie. I don't do that. And sometimes I have tried to almost force myself to do things. I do like running. I like running.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I'm a runner, but I do like running. And so I have run marathons because clearly because I love it, because I love raising money for the charities that I love, because the day is amazing. But when you're training for the marathon, it forces me to run. Because if I have a normal week, I'll probably run once a week. But if I'm training for the marathon, then I have to run 4 times a week, whether I like it or not. And so it forces me to do it. And so sometimes you have to almost trick yourself to book something so that you have to do it, because it's a lot of times when I don't want to run. Last thing I want to do is to run, but I do it because if I'm preparing for the marathon, I have to do it.
So all of these 5 things, you said it already, is about habits. And I think they're difficult to change, but not impossible. And you just shared that you force yourself. But a lot of people, I include myself, if I want to build a new habit, there is so much friction. I think that's the word, to make it happen. Right.
Yeah.
And apart from forcing, what would you recommend people to do if they really, because I would say personally, I'm afraid I will get cancer because my mom had cancer. So I say, oh, I'm next. I'm like, it's very likely that it was going to happen to me. So how can you encourage people is this lifestyle changes? It's a habit.
Yeah. 10% increases, 10%. So for example, if you're a smoker and you smoke 10 a day, you cannot go cold turkey. Some people can, but most people can't. So if you smoke 10 a day, then you smoke 9 for a month, and then 8 for a month, and then you just decrease very, very slowly. The same with alcohol. It's not about, okay, I'm not going to drink, and that's fine, because you'll do it for a week or for 2 weeks, and then you go back to the same thing. With exercise, the same. And I always say to my patients, don't go mad joining the gym and going every day, because you're going to go to a gym for 2 weeks and then you're never going to go. So it has to be something that you like, and you do it slowly, and you increase. So exercise, so you either decrease by 10% smoking, alcohol, or you increase exercise by 10%. So if you do, you could do a class a week for a few weeks, and then you can increase to 2 classes a week, and then until it has to be realistic. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. And with whatever hobby you have, whether it's reading or swimming, again, you have to sometimes, if you like it, you have to like it, because if you don't like it, you're never going to do it. Having a partner to do it with is very helpful. And I can tell you, when I run, if I run on my own, I'll run to a certain speed. But if I run with Alison, I'll run for longer, or I'll run faster. And also when I just don't feel like it, just when you have someone with you, you're more likely to do it. So having a partner to do exercise, whether it's a friend or whatever, it'll motivate you more, and you'll last longer. And ultimately, what I say, we try to put pressure on governments and about national policy, international policy, but these are things that we can do regardless of the national policy, international policy. These are things that if you do, you're helping yourself. And those 5 things, the not smoking, cutting down alcohol, having a healthy weight, enjoying the sun responsibly, looking after our immune system by reducing chronic stress. if you do that, if we do that, yeah, we are reducing the chances of getting cancer by 40%, but also it'll be very unlikely for us to develop diabetes. It will be very unlikely for us to have a heart attack. It'll be very unlikely for us to have a stroke. So the benefits for your health are monumental. So cancer clearly is a scary one.
Yeah.
But all the other health benefits are monumental.
Yeah, definitely. So I would guess one of your challenges. So I want to ask you a little bit about the challenges you have encountered. I don't think you are on an easy mission, and I admire you for having such courage and determination. And you need a lot of grit as well, lots of discipline and determination. So I would guess one of the challenges is the behavioral changes in your patients. But I guess once the diagnosis has been made, people change because it becomes so painful. But are there any other challenges that you have encountered in your work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, in cancer care, things happen quickly.
Yeah.
You know, if I want to start someone in treatment, if I want to scan, if I want to biopsy, things happen quickly. Cancer care, things just happen almost immediately. But when we are outside the cancer care world, so one of my missions, one of the things I really, really love is to change policy at the national level. And that's why I work with Cancer Reseach UK as an ambassador, and that's why I work with Maggie as well, because we can make changes at a bigger scale. And the challenge there is that things don't happen quickly. You know, I'm used to things happening quickly when we're treating cancer patients, but when you're then dealing with businesses and politicians, things don't happen quickly. And so I have to be patient, I have to be polite, I have to listen to arguments that sometimes some arguments are ridiculous, some arguments are actually quite clever. And so it's how to, so the challenge for me is to convince people at a bigger scale to change things for the better for everyone. Because I can do changes myself, and that's fine. I can try to make changes with my patients, that's fine. But really what we want is change at a massive national, international level. And that's what we do with Cancer Reseach UK. And those are the things that we want. We want, for example, the smoking ban. And we want the government to help us in promoting, healthy weight, healthy living, less alcohol, enjoying the sun responsibly. So it's that education at the mass scale to change things. And that's frustrating because it doesn't happen as quickly as we would like it.
So don't you stress, Hugo? I mean, you do so much. How do you manage all of these different roles? You have to see patients, which I'm sure they adore you. I'm sure you're a great doctor with them. They must be very fond of you. I think you're very caring. Yes. How do you cope with all of these demands that you have put on yourself because you're so determined?
No, again, I haven't managed to get the balance right. I think for me, the most difficult thing is to switch off after clinics, because my job as a cancer consultant is, with my patients is like a chess match against cancer. Mm-hmm. So if the cancer is behaving or the cancer is responding, then it's great. But then I need to think, okay, what's going to happen when this cancer doesn't behave? And so I need to think almost like 2 steps ahead. So if the cancer does this, well, I'm going to do that. And if the cancer does that, then I'm going to do this. And I do that for all patients. And I'm always thinking of patients and say, okay, what am I going to do? And it's very difficult for me to switch off. And when I get home, again, one of the things that I have learned is the brutality of cancer and what it does to families. Yeah. And so the time that I have with my family, I think is, it's not that it's more precious than anyone else's, but I value it very, very much because I see the brutality that cancer does. And so when I get home, so that's kind of my sanctuary, if you like, when I play with my kids and we go for a walk or we play on the trampoline or we play tickles or whatever. and then I switch off, and then I can feel it that I'm kind of back to normal. And one thing I don't do private practice, and I don't do it because I don't have any incline, I don't have any need, I don't see the, if my patients could be treated better privately than on the NHS, I would do it. But that's not the case. And because it's not the case, that's why I don't do it. But I think if I did, I wouldn't have, I had to do it outside my NHS time. So I would have to do it on weekends or during the evenings. And I have no inclination doing that. So I'd rather use my free time working with Cancer Research UK, Maggie's, trying to educate kids about the dangers of smoking, vaping, alcohol. Because sadly, sometimes dealing with adults, it's difficult because people become very cynical, and me included. So trying to convince an adult is sometimes more challenging. So when we go to schools and we try to just teach kids about, again, we don't tell kids what to do. It's not about scaring them either. But we just give information and say, you can do whatever you want, but this is what can happen. And they have plenty of things on their plates already. So I said, don't make life more difficult for you by smoking, vaping, drinking, and all of that. So we need to get the kids early so that we can make our points early, because otherwise it's too late.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I like that you decompress by spending time with your family. I think a lot of, I speak for myself, I don't know about other people, but you bring stuff from work into your family arena, and it's really hard to not let it affect that area. And I think over time you learn to kind of separate both. It's a skill. I think in the mind you need to train your mind to do it. Hugo, we are almost in the finish line, and I'm really curious about what are your future goals? Where do you see yourself as a professional, or maybe in your personal life as well, in 10, 20 years? What would you like to achieve?
My goal is to have every cancer patient on a clinical trial from the beginning. The first treatment a patient receives, whether it's curative or not, it has to be on a clinical trial. And we don't do that currently because there's a lot of reasons why not. But, and so if we can convince businesses and politicians to help us back research, if they help us prevent 40% of the cancers by educating people around not smoking, drinking less alcohol, having a healthy weight, enjoying the sun responsibly, managing chronic stress. If we do that, we can reduce 40% the amount of cancer. But also, we will reduce a lot of diabetes, a lot of heart attacks, a lot of strokes, which is what puts a lot of pressure on the NHS and on any health system anywhere in the world. So if we do that, we would release and remove massive stress from the NHS. Waiting times, at the moment, waiting times is a massive thing. The waiting list, we're not hitting the targets. People are waiting for treatment. That is very completely unacceptable and wrong. But if we remove that pressure from the NHS, then the waiting times will disappear, and the amount of money that governments would save is, again, monumental. We're not talking about millions of pounds. We're talking about billions of pounds. So the benefit from the health of the population is monumental, and the amount of money that governments would save, again, monumental. So I want to see that. I want to see that in my lifetime. And I want to see that patients get their first treatment within a clinical trial, and that hospitals are not completely beyond working conditions, and that the health of any nation is better. That's what I would like to see in my lifetime. See.
Okay, an ambitious goal, but I don't think is impossible. What would you need?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
No. What would you need, Hugo, to achieve this? I think you're doing a lot I think people have to ask for it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of my amazing, I belong to this amazing community of Cancer Research UK ambassadors, and we do that across the country.
Mm-hmm.
We all do that. We talk to our MPs, we talk to politicians, we talk to businesses to change minds. Again, smoking. Again, the link of smoking has been there between smoking and cancer for 70 years, and still we're still fighting for a government to say, cigarettes are going to become illegal. And the people that smoke, and they're adults, they will be able to continue smoking if they want to. But what we don't want is kids to ever smoke. And that's something that I want to see, that my kids are never, ever in their lifetimes able to buy a cigarette, ever. And that's something that we can definitely do.
Yes.
But again, it takes patience to convince enough people to get it done.
It is possible, because I remember in the 90s going to restaurants and people were smoking, or in offices. So, it was normal.
In the cinema. You can smoke in the cinema, you can smoke in a plane.
Insane.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hugo. One last question, just to close. If you want to share any final thoughts or tips or the lessons you have learned in this really courageous journey that you've been preventing and fighting cancer with your patients, what would be what's the wisdom that you want to share as a final closing sharing of you?
Well, it's just to say that cancer is brutal, yes. Cancer is very common, yes, but cancer is not invincible. We cure cancer every day, but that's not good enough. We need to cure cancer every single day. And for cancers where the cure rates, I've said this before as well, breast cancer, for example. If you take cancers in general, we cure 50% of cancers, which is nowhere near enough. But there are some cancers like breast cancer where we cure 80% of patients. That's not good enough. We need to cure the other 20%. And again, if we have to accept that a cancer cannot be cured, then that cancer has to become a chronic disease. And until that happens, there's plenty that we have to do.
Okay. Well, thank you, Hugo. I really enjoyed this conversation. There is so much to think about in terms of habits and prevention and just doing what is right for
personal responsibility. Even though we're trying to put pressure on governments and businesses, there are things that are up to us, and we can change those little things.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica.